Hey everyone, and welcome back to Digging Deep. As you can probably already tell, I am not Pastor Kelly. I am Josh Annan. I'm usually behind the scenes during these live streams, but Kelly's on vacation this week, so I figure I'd take an opportunity to try to take the helm in front of this or behind this table to give my own little message. The schedule's a little bit different this week, as you may have found out and seen from my posts, as we're having to rearrange some of the plans. We originally were supposed to do this Digging Deep last night, but there was supposed to be some inclement weather in this area that actually never ended up happening, so I could have easily live streamed, but I felt it was better to be safe. If you are joining me live tonight, I'd like you to just comment in the chat. Just say hi. Let me know where you're watching me from. It's a little lonely here without Kelly and Greg. I'm here. My daughter Leslie is here behind the scenes running the show. So we'll see how this goes tonight with a minimal crew. So again, let me start off with a question just to ask the people watching. What do you think of when you hear the word love? Post comments in the chat. What comes to mind when you think of that word love? I did post that in our Facebook group a couple days ago and got some good responses. A couple people posted they think of God or Jesus, and one person posted they think of their family and their husband. So that is great to hear. When you think of love, those are the things that come to mind. So if you are watching, you have some thoughts of your own, put them in the chat. Another question for you when you think of love, is all love the same? Like, do you love your spouse the same way you love your friends? Do you love your friends the same way you love your kids? Do you love your kids the same way you love your parents, the same way you love your pets, your car, chocolate, fill in the blank? I really love pizza. It's my favorite food by far. I can eat it for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, brunch, second dinner, late night snack, anything. I love pizza. If I was trapped in a desert isle, that's probably the food I would pick to eat the whole time I was there. I feel like it fits all the food groups. It's sort of a universal food in my opinion. It fits all the food groups, whether it's 4 food groups or 7 or whatever, depending on what you find on the internet, and it has all nutrients, carbs, protein, and fats. So I see it as universal food. I really enjoy it. I love it a lot. But do I love pizza the same way I love my wife? Or do I love it the same way I love my kids? Probably not. But we in America, we have one word for love, and that's love. And I feel like we sort of desensitize it sometimes by using the word love for everything, right? We use it interchangeably. We're talking about all sorts of things. If you look at other languages that focus on Greek, the Greek language actually has 7 or debatable more different terms for love, various types of love. For instance, there's eros, which is defined as romantic love. I believe the Greek god of love was also called eros, so that's the romantic love. There's philia, which is the friendship love. That's probably where Philadelphia gets its name, the city of brotherly love. There's ludus, which is playful, flirtatious love. And there's at least 4 or 5 more. The one I want to talk about tonight, though, is agape love. And I think by far that is the greatest love of all the 7 or more loves that the Greek language has. And at its core, agape love is really just defined as unconditional or unselfish love. It's the love that puts the needs of someone else above the needs of your own. In John 3:16, which is, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, you know that one. That love that they're talking about, that is agape love, if you look at the old Greek texts. And essentially that agape love and that love that God has, no matter what your past, your skin color, your nationality, your sexual orientation, your political views, or even if you love God, God loves you, no conditions, period. Now, Easter was about a little over a month ago, but throughout that Easter season and leading up into Easter, we celebrated and focused God's love for us, this agape love, this unconditional love he had for us. As we focus on this post-Easter lifestyle, the question could be, what is our response to this great love, this agape love that God gave to us? Now, if I look into the Bible, many people have pondered what is the greatest commandment? And when people asked Jesus what the greatest commandment was, Jesus responded by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That love that Jesus is talking about, both loving the Lord and also loving your neighbor, that is also agape love. But the question you may ask is, who is my neighbor? Who are we expected to love unconditionally the same way that God loves us? Are we supposed to love just certain people? In short, we're asked to love everyone and spread that unconditional love to everybody that we come into contact with. In chapter 10 of the book of Luke, Jesus was asked this question by an expert of the Jewish law. And essentially, I feel like the expert was hoping to get a specific list of people that he had to love, to be able to check that off the list. And he was also trying to justify maybe how he had lived up to that point by just loving certain people and maybe certain nationalities. To answer this expert's question, Jesus tells one of my favorite parables, which is the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, I know you've probably heard this story countless times before. I wanted to discuss it and break down that story in a little more detail tonight in the hope that maybe you'll learn something new this time around and learn more about how it showcases the agape love. So I'm going to get the Bible out now, and I'm going to read through the Good Samaritan story, and I'm going to stop a couple times just to provide some stuff that I've come to learn along the way of studying this passage. So we got Luke chapter 10, and I am not in the right chapter, so give me a second. Here we go. We have Luke chapter 10, and we'll start with verse 30. This is after the expert asked Jesus, "Who's my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead." Now I'll stop there. Let's talk about this man that was going from Jerusalem down to Jericho. Jesus doesn't specify who this person is, but we can maybe infer that he was probably a Jew, because when Jesus was given this parable, he probably wanted it to be relevant to the expert of the law, as well as his audience, who were most likely Jewish. It's also worth noting that the trek from Jerusalem to Jericho, by today's standards, isn't maybe that bad, but it was 17 miles from about a 2,500 foot descent above sea level to about 800 feet below sea level. So overall, about 3,300 feet descent into Jericho. And that road was rocky, it was a desert terrain, and it provided a lot of natural hiding places for robbers to easily attack defenseless travelers. Now, why was this person traveling by himself? We don't know. It's just part of the parable. So let's continue. So he got beat, and he got robbers left him half dead. So verse 31 picks up, "A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side." Those are some classy folks, am I right? But let's talk a little more about them. So both the priest and the Levite were highly regarded Jewish religious figures of that time. Jesus doesn't explain why they both chose to acknowledge the injured man, and then ultimately decide to pass him by without helping him, but we can make some guesses. These figures were expected to maintain a level of cleanliness to support their temple work and religious duties. So maybe they didn't want to get dirty and become unclean by engaging with this man. Maybe they were in a hurry to make it down to Jericho. Maybe they're going up to Jerusalem to a temple, and they don't want to have to worry about going through all the additional tasks to clean yourself after becoming in contact with someone who was injured. Maybe also they were just too scared to stop. They knew it was a dangerous road. They knew if maybe they stopped, maybe those robbers were still around the area waiting for additional prey, and they didn't want to even bother to stop and get in the same predicament as that injured man. So they just continued to move on. Whether they were too concerned with the Jewish law or they were too scared of getting robbed themselves, that's really not important to the story. What is important that I feel is that these respective people of the injured man's own faith and religion didn't stop to help him. So let's continue with the next verse in this. So that's verse 33. "But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. So let's discuss this Samaritan who seems to be maybe the hero of this story. Let's back up a little bit to understand more of what the Samaritan is and what maybe his nationality was. The Samaritan people were a result of an intermarriage between the Israelites and the Gentiles. And because of this, they sort of combined the worship of God as well as with the idolatrous practices of the Gentiles. They set up temples in their region sort of to rival the Jewish temples in Jerusalem, and they viewed themselves as faithful descendants of Israel. But during Jesus' day, the Jewish people really looked down on the Samaritans. They considered them half-breeds, as they sort of weren't all in on the Jewish faith. They also had the idolatrous practices of the Gentile faith. So they considered them both spiritually and physically just half-breeds. So they really didn't respect them as much as fellow Jewish people. Samaritans also seemed to be hostile towards Jews. So there was not a really good love relationship between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people. In fact, as an example, we're in Luke 10. If you go back to Luke 9, right before Jesus tells this parable, there's a story of Jesus and his disciples traveling through Samaria on their way to Jerusalem. And as they passed a Samaritan village, the people in the village didn't really welcome them in. Jesus wanted to go in and maybe rest for a little bit, but they didn't get a warm reception. One of Jesus' disciples, I believe it was John, asked Jesus if they should call fire down from heaven to destroy the Samaritan village. But Jesus just turned and scolded John for asking that, saying, "No, don't do that. Let's just turn. Let's go to a different village then. We don't need to cause that destruction." So it's fair to say that even if Jesus' disciples felt this way towards Samaritans, that there was a bitter hostility between both groups in Jesus' day. However, in this parable, it's the Samaritan that pushes aside his differences, pushes aside his beliefs, maybe what he's been taught in the past, and does all he can to help this injured Jewish man that he sees lying on the side of the road. Now, it must have come as a shock to those listening to Jesus' parable that a Samaritan, of all people, was the one that stopped to help someone considered to be an enemy. One other thing I was thinking about when I was reading this parable was, okay, if I was a Jewish man and I was left for dead on the ground, and one of my enemies that I was hostile towards came by to save me, how would I feel? Would I accept that help? Or would I just say, no, I don't need it, move on, I'm better off dead? So at its surface, this parable teaches us that our neighbor is anybody, even someone who we may deem unworthy of our love, unworthy of our attention, someone that we don't want to even break bread with because their beliefs are so far removed from our own. But let's go a little further and make it maybe more relevant in today's context. If we start with the Jewish man that was injured and robbed, he can represent, we'll just say he represents an individual or just a group journeying through life, right? These robbers that come along could be a person or a system that can cause harm to that person or that group, right? Either physically or emotionally harm to that individual or group. And that brings us to the religious figures. Those are the figures that represent people that I believe may be expected to help or console those that have been harmed. Maybe friends, maybe relatives, religious leaders, the church, but they pass by due to their own prejudices and biases, right? They pretend that the injured person doesn't exist or ignore their calls for help. They operate with conditional love, but not with an unconditional love that we've been talking about with Agape. And finally, there's this Samaritan. So that Samaritan could be any person who cares unconditionally and will do whatever they can to help a person in need, regardless of who they are, who their background is, what their beliefs are, what other differences they may have. They throw those aside and do whatever they can to help this person unconditionally. So as you reflect on the story, the question maybe to ask is, which character do you see yourself as? Are you like the religious figures where you're guilty of judging who's worthy of your love and not treating everyone with the same unconditional love that God offers you? Or are you like the Samaritan who bestows this agape love upon everyone you interact with, regardless of who they are? As I've been wrestling with that, I see myself sort of in the middle. There are occasions when I do feel like I am the Samaritan where I set aside my differences to help someone. But there are totally, other occasions where I'm like the religious figures and I just don't want to have anything to do with them. There are occasions like I've been, approached by people in parking lots or in stores asking for money or asking for help, and my first thought is to be suspicious, right? And that's probably not a good mindset to have, but that's just what I think of. I'm suspicious of, are they just trying to take my money for drugs, or they really need help, right? So I've been guilty, and I've reflected on some of these experiences after they've happened, and I felt really guilty for not going all in with the agape love whenever a need is presented to me. But regardless of these two, there's other person. Could you relate more to the man that was left on the side of the road, right? Have you been injured? Have you been left out or turned away by a person or group who you thought was your friend or ally, even by someone who called themselves a Christian? I feel like that happens more often than not, unfortunately, this day and age, with people that feel that they can be, they feel that they can, get support from people they trust, only to find that those people that they thought they could trust turn on them when they find out they don't believe the same things as them, or they don't have the same sexual orientation as them. So it can be hard to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul if you haven't experienced agape love for yourself. In the book, The Misunderstood Jew, Amy Jill Levine reflects on the parable of the Good Samaritan. I think she has something good to, in that book that says, we should think of ourselves as the person in the ditch, and then ask, is there anyone from any group about whom we'd rather die than acknowledge she offered help or he showed compassion? More, is there any group whose members might rather die than help us? If so, then we know how to find the modern equivalent for the Samaritan. I think that's pretty powerful to think about. So as we go throughout this week, I encourage all of you to think about and find your Samaritan or your injured person on the side of the road, and treat them with the agape love that maybe they don't deserve, but that's asked of us from God. What I want to end tonight with is 1 Corinthians 13. And you'll definitely recognize 1 Corinthians 13 because that is the famous love chapter that's read countless times at weddings. Love is patient, love is kind. But that love that's described in 1 Corinthians 13, that is also agape love. So I wanted to read some of the verses. So I'll read verses 4 through 8 and 13. And I'd like you not to think about weddings or marriage or any other ceremonies you may have heard this at, but reflect on how you can apply this love to your neighbor. So let me find that. So that's 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, and then 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love, and that's the agape love. So will you pray with me? Lord, thank you for your unconditional love, even though there are times we feel we may not deserve it. Forgive us for the times when we also pass by injured people that we deem unworthy of our love. Open our hearts to spread this unconditional agape love like a wildfire to our neighbors, regardless of who they are. Please also be with those who have not experienced this agape love and may have put up walls to protect themselves from getting hurt again. Allow them to be able to experience unconditional love and give them the courage to call out for help instead of hiding behind their walls. Watch over all of us throughout this upcoming week and bring us all back together safely next week. Amen. Now this agape love, this unconditional love, that's one of the main cornerstones of this online Facebook community, the Uprooted Faith. That's what Kelly and I try to do week after week with our messages, with our discussions, with our posts. We're here for you. We're here to help you, give you whatever support you need, whatever struggles you're going through. So if there's any help, any support or you just want someone to pray with, reach out to us. Private message Kelly or myself. Let us know what we can do to help you in any of your hard times. As we look up the rest of this week, since the schedule is a little wonky compared to last week, we'll also be live again tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be for Josh Wonders Why, which is typically on Monday nights, but we'll be on Thursday night. And we'll have some special guests tomorrow night. So if you hadn't heard, the UMC General Conference just wrapped up 2 weeks down in Charlotte, North Carolina. You may have seen articles in the news, it was covered by the different jurisdictions they were discussing, the votes they were taking, but I was able to get 2 of the Indiana delegates. So my wife, Mary Kate Annan, was one of them, and Janae LaFuz is the other one. They'll be here tomorrow night to reflect on their experience and maybe discuss, what actually happened at General Conference versus what you may have read in the news, because the news tends to skew things. So if you'd like to join live tomorrow and ask your own questions, maybe you read some article in the news that confuses you from what you heard, maybe you have some questions, concerns with what you read, or maybe even your friends or neighbors are questioning you with what they read in the news. If you have any questions about anything that happened, join us tomorrow and feel free to just post them and ask. We'll have an open conversation. I'll have some good questions to ask them as well, but you won't want to miss that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then Kelly will be back next week, and we'll be back for another Josh Wonders Why on Monday night. And that one I still need to figure out what I'm going to wonder about, but I'm sure I'll come up with a topic to discuss that will be entertaining and fun by next Monday. So again, I appreciate you watching us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the comments. Bye.